Okay, so we just finished up our run to master, as people know, and we did it with a Praxis tokens deck. And the thing that changed the Praxis tokens deck around, the thing that took it from a deck that was kind of losing in Diamond to a deck that basically just bounced straight to master. It took us an hour on this stream and like half an hour on the last stream. Like we basically went from Diamond 3 to Diamond 1 with something like 2 to 3 losses. The thing that we did that changed that deck around for the better was we added in Combrei Emissary, because my Praxis deck is running a splashed green. And having Combrei Emissary as a ramp card allowed us to get into a lot of our later stuff a bit earlier, get access to a bunch of the cards that really take advantage of massive amounts of tokens and massive amounts of dudes, and basically just get into a situation where we could very easily play out Claws of the First Dragon, 8-power Xenan Obelisks, just basically get to everything like way faster than our opponent could, and therefore run our opponent down with a bunch of mid-range stuff. And that's a pretty good transition, as it turns out, into Champion of Impulse, which is the first spoiler and the official spoiler of this week's 5 set, and our very first champion of the new set of Omens of the Past. I'm pretty fond of this art, actually. Like, this is really flashy stuff, and the card itself is pretty interesting. So it is a 3-power card, Fire and Time, a 2/2, and with 3 time it becomes a 4/4. So immediately the stat line that you're looking for is essentially a 4/4/4/3, which is, as it turns out, very good. It's actually, I think, the best stat line for 3 that you can get at the moment. Champion of Chaos matches that pretty closely at a 5/3 for 3, but 5/3, it turns out, is not as good, although certainly Champion of Chaos does have good abilities to make up for it. So yeah, 4/4 for 3 is something that is above Torch at 3. That means it's typically going to be pretty hard to kill, and it's also going to be something that deals a decent amount of damage. So that alone is pretty interesting. The thing that's really interesting about this card, however, is the triple fire ability, which says that when Champion of Impulse attacks, you get +1 power this turn. Now, this power is not maximum power, so it is just power that you get to spend for free. And this is the first time that we've actually seen this mechanic in Eternal. But it is a pretty fire mechanic. Fire already has a lot of cost reduction abilities, a lot of ways to sort of ramp out cards with things like Trail Stories and Quarry, where you get things a little bit faster than you should, and as a result it sort of lends itself to Fire's natural aggression. Now, what this card is doing is even better. It's giving you a very flexible amount of extra power whenever you attack. And it's basically enforcing the idea that if you are attacking, you are going to be able to play more stuff and replace the stuff that you are already attacking with. This is a very Praxis idea, as it turns out. Praxis is not opposed to throwing a bunch of stuff on the table and being very careless with it. That's something that Praxis tokens has always been about. You really want to be aggressive with those tokens and try and get those tokens destroyed. But it's also something that has sort of begun to show itself in other Praxis designs. You see cards like Praxis Outlaw, which doesn't care about card advantage, but happens to be which specifically rewards you for not caring about card advantage. You have the card Praxis Displacer, which is a card that is all about tempo but not about card advantage. This is something where basically the Praxis style, and the thing that the Champion of Impulse is sort of rallying Praxis around, is the idea of being very fast, very aggressive, and very, not to say efficient, but definitely very capable of just throwing all of the stuff on the board. So with Time's natural power boosting mechanics, as well as Fire's new power boosting mechanics, we have a pretty potent combination, and that's one of the reasons why I think this card is actually super strong. So this is a champion on the level of Champion of Chaos. This is very close. It remains to be seen if it will be as good as Champion of Chaos, but I think it is in the upper 5 champions. It is a pretty strong one. It's a very spiky champion. It is actually something that has just a lot of extra stats for a very short cost, and that influence requirement, as anyone who plays Champion of Chaos will know, is actually not that hard to meet. Or at least it's not that hard to meet one particular influence requirement on turn 3 when you need it. So, for anyone who played the old Champion of Chaos that used to be a 5/5 when you had a particular amount of influence, or at least get to a 4/4 when you had 4 Shadow. that was really important, and getting a champion on curve like that was basically just giving you the game, because it was so hard to get rid of that card. It's hard to torch, it's hard to kill. This card is like really, really solid at 3, and the main thing about this card is that while people often evaluate it and say, this card doesn't win the game on its own, this is something that like Praxis just doesn't have. Praxis does not have extremely efficient drops at 3. And the ones that they do have, like, they still need to fill this slot. So Champion of Impulse is definitely going to be in this slot. I think it's going to be pretty much guaranteed in most Praxis slots. I don't know if it will be a huge supporter of Praxis tokens, but judging by the deck that we just built, I think that it definitely can work there and can belong there. So there are some drawbacks to the card. Obviously, if you are attacking with the unit for a power, that's not amazing, but this is something that you have control over. So this is a decision where if you want to cast your thing earlier, you have to weigh whether or not it's worth it to attack with the champion into a potentially bad board. And there are some good interactions with this already, like your opponent may not know that you have a hip shot on top of your deck, for example. Your opponent is going to have to play around cards like Rampage and Torch that already exist in this particular setup. And even if you don't have any power at the moment, like if you play out your turn 4 Sandstorm Titan and attack with Champion of Impulse, then you get an extra power to spend on a card like Torch. So your opponent is not necessarily going to be able to easily respond to Champion of Impulse in a way that's really special. So there are some things that you can do to actually like control that level of extra power, and that's pretty beneficial. I think with Praxis decks you are going to be attacking most of the time, so I don't think that Champion of Impulse's particular issues with attacking are too big. That's a drawback, but it's not a significantly strong drawback. So basically, this is a card you have to build around a little bit, or rather, it is a card that if you don't build around, it will be strong, but if you build around it, it's way stronger, because this is the card that basically just stacks up and gets a ton of extra power, and when you are stacking power ramping effects on top of each other, you can get to cards very, very quickly. So the example I think I gave when I was first looking at this card was turn 1, Initiative of the Sands. Turn 2, play a banner, and then play Champion of Impulse. Turn 3, you play your third time. You have a 4/4 to attack with, or maybe you play your third fire, or something like that. Like basically if you played a seat and then a fire and then another fire. Either way, you get one of these two effects, and then you can play Sandstorm Titan into Torch, you can play Xenan Obelisk into something else. This is turn 4. This is when you are putting down Xenan Obelisk on turn 3. That is something to be considering as pretty important, because a Xenan Obelisk on turn 3 is basically nuts, and having something else to cast on top of that is also really good. We don't know what kind of 5-drops Praxis is going to have, but Praxis can hit those 5-drops on turn 3, and that makes them very scary. It's not going to be able to do things with, funnily enough, 2 of the 5-drops that it already has, which is Soulfire Drake, a card that really wants to be attacking the turn it comes out, and Arcana Monitor, a card that really wants to be buffing Champion of Impulse. Neither of those can be cast until after the turn that you play them. Or, well, I mean, they can. Well, yeah, they can't be cast until after the point where you have attacked. So they don't give their benefit to Champion of Impulse in that sense, and they don't have the benefit of charge. But other 5-drops like Twin Brood Sauropod, any other 5-drop will have that sort of bonus where you can just get to something really, really quickly. And this is something we have seen also supported by the new Warp card, the 3-power card that gives you +1 power. So you could very easily replicate this particular scenario and get to 5 drops on turn 3 pretty easily. So from a Johnny perspective, from like a person who wants to like assemble combos and do really silly things, there are some really cool things going on with the card. But I think that mostly what this card is a good spike card. Like, this is a card that is just on face very powerful, and it's very similar to Champion of Chaos in that respect. 4/4s are not traditionally great stats. They do get blocked by a lot of different things. You can get stymied by Combrei healers, you can get stymied by Feln Bloodcasters, but getting stymied by a Feln Bloodcaster is not really the end of the world when you are also getting that ramp effect off of Champion of Impulse. And overall, you're also going to be like throwing a bunch of cards like Piercing Shot and Torch. You're going to be throwing Burn everywhere. You have cards like Ancient Lore that really, really demand a lot of power, but are so worth it if you can actually play them and continue to curve out as you are doing so. Like, there's a lot in Praxis that allows you to just basically play out your board, and if you can just get these cards down, then you are going to be in a winning position on the board. And Champion of Impulse really, really supports that in a way that's very, very cool. So, yeah, card's an insane aggressive card. It's promoting a very aggressive archetype, and it's kind of promoting an aggressive mid-range style of Praxis, as well as the aggressive like token style, where you are just double rallying on turn 4, or like doing something crazy with just a ton of like extra dudes very, very quickly. I think that this card is, like most of the champions, just a really strong supporter of its faction, but also something that by itself is just very good to play. So if you're in Praxis, this card will be probably a 4 of include. Like, there's not that many reasons not to run it. Basically, that slot currently doesn't have anything in it. We can't evaluate all of the decks that it's going to support. I suspect it will support a lot of interesting and weird decks, but the question is specifically, like, does this do okay in a vacuum? And the answer is yes. This is a very solid card. So there's a lot of things that are really, really good for this card, and I think that people are kind of criminally undervaluing it in terms of what I've seen from people looking at it. This is probably the strongest spoiler that we've released. I'm looking forward to building around this in the event this weekend. So that's actually the next thing on the list. For those of you who do not know, we are having an Omens of the Past event weekend this weekend, which is the 24th and 25th and 23rd, I guess. So starting on the 23rd, if you build a deck with only Praxis cards, only Skycrag cards, only Huru cards, etc., etc., if you build it with any of the 5 opposing color factions, you can enter in this event, and you can play a game in which they will give you one of the 5 promo cards that we have already spoiled, which is to say Champion of Impulse, the Calderan Cauldron, Calderan Cradle, as it is called. We can give you the Minotaur Gunslinger, whose name is Auric Renegade. Auric Renegade? This would be easier if I actually remembered all of the names, but we're still getting used to the cards. And the new Mentor card, the Green-Blue Aerialist Trainer. I'm gonna get all of these. So we're at Huru, Skycrag, Praxis. That leaves Xenan, which means the Restless Radiant card, Bloodcall Invoker. Yeah, there we go. So you can play all 5 of those cards. 4 of them will be added to your 75 card deck, and you will be ready to rock and roll. And in addition, anyone who gets to win the game, or anyone who wins the most games, I believe, with the particular deck that they've brought, gets crowned champion of that particular faction. So this is just like a fun pre-release event, and like, if there was one thing that I really wanted Eternal to have, it's pre-release events. I'm so psyched about this. This is just a really cool way to play a game where you have this kind of limited format where basically the deck that you build is very unique in that it is neither set 1 nor set 2. You will never see a deck like this again, but like, what you are doing with it is going to be really interesting and different. I'm really looking forward to seeing what everyone brings and what everyone gets to do. So yeah, that's the big news, and I'm pretty excited about it. So yeah, this is a 4/4 for 3 that ramps you. That is just bananas. Like, that is not a card that you can take lightly, and the influence requirements are not that hard to meet, as we know from Champion of Chaos. So Praxis in particular is really, really solid at meeting these particular influence requirements. Like, it's just very, very solid. Thanks for the host Clarity GGTV. And yeah, I think that like overall, like this is pretty good stuff. Praxis will be the faction that runs banners and seats most of all. Like, Praxis is really good at playing with banners, so I think overall this isn't going to be too hard for them to hit. Yeah, so pretty exciting card. The art's really interesting. The hair is very unusual and weird. I'm not sure what's going on there, and we have some like really cool fire effects. I actually do like that quite a bit, so it's pretty neat. We'll see how that goes. And yeah, next up is we have 2 cards that were spoiled by Scarlatch, exploring the mentor mechanic a little bit more. Now, I believe I said that there would be spells focused around mentors. We didn't end up with, or the one that was spoiled is not the one that I was speculating on. I figured it would not be, but we instead got something interesting. Master's Lesson. Okay, so this card is a mentor card in which the mentor is the spell itself. So when you play Mentor's Lesson or Master's Lesson, you choose to mentor a unit, and then you draw a card for each of that unit's battle skills. And that unit again becomes a student, which is something that is relevant for other situations. As we can see, this card is pretty strong in certain setups. It's actually fairly hard to draw more than 2 cards off of this card, but having a 4-cost card that draws 2 cards is not too bad. Of course, that influence requirement is very, very deep, which makes it probably the most expensive and least effective draw 2 card that you have in Eternal at the moment. But this card works very well on Silverwing Familiar in particular, a card that when it comes down on 3 is very unlikely for your opponent to kill. And at that point, it draws you 3 cards, which at the cost of 2 green influence, 2 blue influence, and 4 is very, very reasonable. So that's the immediate combo that Master's Lesson has. We're going to see if there are more of them. Obviously, if you can put this on a crowned unit that has Crown of Possibilities skills all over the place and has like 15 different battle skills, you'll draw a billion cards and it'll be delightful. At that point, you might be winning anyways, but Master's Lesson is certainly something that you can use to refuel your decks in cool ways. And the thing that everyone has already pointed out is that Hero of the People gets many, many battle skills. So if you are going to play Master's Lesson on Hero of the People, if you can manage to keep Hero of the People alive, then this is really, really good there. So this is a really good support card for a Hero of the People deck, which is not a valid deck in the archetype at the moment, but could end up being so on this particular deck setup. Borma says, on Ikaria, but it's too deep. I don't think it's too deep. Ikaria Blue actually exists, but also, like, once you play it, you don't need to draw cards anymore. You're done. You've won. Like, it's very rare that you play an Ikaria and you're like, oh, well, now I potentially could lose the game. Once the Ikaria is down, that's sort of the determining factor as to whether or not you've won. But if it does go long, if you're playing Ikaria Control, Master's Lesson will certainly help you out. So... yeah, so this card's going to be played on Silverwing a lot. Hero of the People is pretty cool. Yeah, I think overall this looks pretty good. Yeah, so we have established that Mentor is a keyword ability. And I think I previously said that it was closer to Soul Bond, but I'm not sure that being a mentor is necessarily as important as being a student now. It seems like the most important thing about being a mentor is actually being a student. And one of the things that we've established as a result of that is the other spoiler, which is Crownwatch Squire. Alright, now this card reads, the first time that Crownwatch Squire is a student, it gets +2/+2. In the context of the card that we've already seen, this is a card that plays as a 1/1/1, doesn't really do much on the first turn, doesn't really do much on the second turn, and then on the third turn you can make it into a 4/4 as well as play your own 2/4 for 3. So not amazing with the current card that we have seen, but Crownwatch Squire is clearly something that we are going to want to make a student with other cards. And it's something in particular that demonstrates that the design of being a student matters. Declaring a student is something important. We are going to find ways to buff up those students. We are going to, in some way, play upon this interplay between mentor and student and show, basically just make students something that's actually dangerous and a threat. So there's still a lot of hidden extra value in the mentor-student pairing, and that's pretty exciting. I also like Crownwatch Squire's art quite a bit. This is a really cute little person. I'm not sure if it is. Yeah, just lovely, lovely setup. Like such a tiny squire, and just adorables. I'm pleased. So good art, and any type of mentor is going to make Crownwatch Squire a pretty playable card in early setups. Most of the time a 1/1 for 1 is not typically worth it. A 1/1 that becomes a 3/3 is very worth it, especially in draft situations. So if you're going to be playing Mentor Student in draft, then Crownwatch Squire is going to be a pretty solid uncommon to be picking up. So looks pretty solid. So yeah, we know now that mentors are pretty relevant. Let me go ahead and move that up so that it starts showing up for people. All right. And yeah, I think that this is an exciting set of spoilers to be seen. That's it for this particular spoiler roundup. We're going to go back to some games and some draft. So to the YouTube folks, thanks for watching. See you next time.